Joining us now is the editor-in-chief for the Dallas Cowboys, blogging the boys on SB Nation. He joined us about 11 months ago, back in September, after the Cowboys' Week 3 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Shout out to him. We're bringing him on the show right now. It is RJ Ochoa who is joining us. RJ, how are you doing tonight, my man?
I'm doing well. I'm also a grad student at the University of Florida, so I just want to say that Tennessee is stupid and ugly and horrible in every single way. Just while I can offer that, I see a basketball behind you. If I could also ask for a reminder on who the national champions are.
Oh, don't do this. I already have a good friend of mine. Shout out to Tim Barnard, who's a big Florida fan. I don't need to double this up right now, RJ. I can't handle this right now, especially not here in August. We're here to talk Cowboys. So again, 10 days ago, Micah Parsons asked for a trade out of Dallas, and that's been obviously the pervading storyline for the Cowboys. What are you hearing right now? What's the latest? Any sort of traction? Any sort of progress on a potential deal with Micah?
I mean, it just kind of seems like everything is as it was when Micah authored the request, as it was before Micah authored the request. It just seems like this has been the same. This is kind of like the Breaking Bad Fly episode where like nothing really happened. You know what I mean? Like we're just kind of waiting for it to end and waiting for the next bit of development. Like we're so desperate for any kind of development one way or another. That's all we care about. It is insane how predictable this was, and that we're still here in mid-August with it being the case.
And that's the part that I think is so fascinating about how Jerry Jones tends to handle these deals. Like, we know what happened with Dak Prescott last year. Like, I'm a big Dak guy. I was, as a Steelers fan, like crossing my fingers, man, he's going to be a free agent. Maybe the Steelers can go after him. And then literally the day of the Cowboys opening game against the Cleveland Browns, hours before, he signs it signs the long-term extension, biggest ever in the history of the NFL with Dallas. But we can go in, just for those that maybe have forgotten how good Micah Parsons is, we can go and put up the numbers. Tied for 5th in sacks and tackles for Lawson's entering the league, 2nd in pass rush grade, 2nd in win rates, and 1st in pressure rate, all according to Pro Football Focus. So obviously we know how productive this guy has been. Do you think this is similar to the Dak deal, to the CeeDee Lamb deal, in the sense that, okay, this is just Jerry dragging it out for storylines? Because I've sensed, and maybe I'm getting played again, but I've sensed a different tone in Jerry recently that, okay, there does seem to actually be a little bit of bad blood here that Micah led on, obviously, in that trade request.
I think where it's the same is in that the Cowboys have dragged it out to the 11th hour. We're not quite at the 11th, but the same in that sense. It's the same in that Micah is a star player for the team. Where I think it's different is I appreciate you being a Dak guy. I know we talked about that, and you wanted him, and there were some people, the true ball knowers out there who know that Dak is great, but the reality of Dak is he's incredibly divisive for people, even for Cowboys fans. So, when that conversation was happening a year ago, there was a large, or at least a loud sector of people saying, don't do it, right? Like he sucks, he's terrible, whatever. Like, those people are out there. And even CeeDee, who didn't have that same divisiveness, held out. And so he wasn't in camp. So you had the people who, swear by the owners, who say he needs to be there, he needs to honor his contract, et cetera, et cetera. Micah, something I've said for the last few weeks is he began this whole process with the court of public opinion way more behind him than either Dak or CeeDee, for those exact reasons. And because if you did not know how the Cowboys go about this prior to Dak and CeeDee, that at the very least opened your eyes. So you had some wide open eyes entering this situation. So all of that is working in Micah's favor. He's also been very tactical about all this. He said back in December, I didn't personally believe him, not to call him a liar, that he didn't need to be the highest paid player, highest paid defensive player. He said that, I would assume, knowing that the Myles Garrett deal would get done and that Dallas would drag their feet and that maybe a TJ Watt deal would get done. And so now the numbers just kind of, speak for themselves. He's also been very vocal. He has a podcast. Granted, he hasn't done any episodes or anything, but he's not shy. Dak and or CeeDee could have made matters way more difficult for the Cowboys if they wanted to last year, but they didn't. And I don't mean to say that Micah's being a jerk or not playing nice. I don't want to cast that kind of, air over this, but he is, wielding some different power because that's just how he chooses to be. And unlike Dak or CeeDee, who had a higher approval rating, I think even the biggest Cowboys critic or hater or whatever acknowledges that Micah's the 3rd best defensive player in the NFL at worst. Maybe you think he's the 2nd or the 1st. So my point with all of this is Micah has this bright shining light on him and on the Joneses for being so silly about this whole process. That's where I think it's different. That's not to say that I think anything will ever change. But I do think he has exposed them in a different way. But that was ultimately possible because of Dak and CD, if that makes sense.
No, it does, because there was, as you said, there was already the expectation going in that this was going to get dragged out the way it did, with pass rushers
Right.
like Crosby, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett getting paid. And I think what's interesting about the point you make is that, you know, the fact that Micah exposed the fact that, yeah, Jerry was trying to negotiate with Micah without his agent, I think adds a whole different layer to it. And as you said, the court of public opinion is certainly behind Micah Parsons. So we'll see how this continues to play out. If there's no traction for a while, it certainly sounds like, based on what Jerry said recently, that he may not be in the field for the opening night game against Philadelphia. So we'll see how that continues to play out. One of the big storylines for Dallas this year, maybe the biggest other than Micah, is the fact that there's a new head coach, Brian Schottenheimer, who had taken 4 other offensive coordinator jobs, including in Dallas with Mike McCarthy, even if he didn't really call plays with Coach McCarthy. What are you seeing thus far? It feels like, from what I've heard out of Cowboys camp and reading about it, it feels like because he was with the Seahawks for 3 years with Pete Carroll as the OC, that he's trying to evoke some sort of like a Pete Carroll optimistic, energetic approach. Do you think that's translating to the team? I know there's been a lot of memes and people making fun of the Cowboys, like some of their team activities. But what do you think? What do you think is different from Schottenheimer than McCarthy, and maybe from other previous Cowboys coaches, like, you know, like a Jason Garrett or a Wade Phillips? Like, what are you seeing from Schottenheimer thus far?
I know when we spoke last, I gave, or at least tried to give, Mike McCarthy credit because people were so unwilling to do so. I mean, this is a team that won a lot of games in the regular season, albeit, and experienced high levels of offensive success when he was the offensive play caller. And people just want to act like that didn't happen because, like, 15 years ago, Mike McCarthy lost the PR battle to Aaron Rodgers, who we have also, no offense, learned is not necessarily the most trustworthy person when it comes to things like this.
No offense
Uh,
taken. Yeah, I know.
Right. And so, like, even still, Mike can't even get like a scrap of a piece of credit. But as it relates to Schottenheimer, I think important context is that the Cowboys dragged the McCarthy thing out, the departure from McCarthy. They obviously didn't make the playoffs. So the whole wild card week, it was, we're figuring out whatever. And it wasn't until the Monday after the Monday of wild card Monday night that they decided to move on. And they spent that first week, which was the divisional round week, interviewing different candidates, but they could not interview the candidates who belonged to the number 1 seeds in each respective conference, the Lions and the Chiefs coordinators, because they dragged it out. So they couldn't speak to Ben Johnson. They couldn't speak to Aaron Glenn, which is insanity when you really go back and think about it. But they spent the first week talking to Kellen Moore, Robert Saleh, Leslie Frazier. And it wasn't until after the divisional round was fully completed, the Monday after, that Brian Schottenheimer emerged, not because he was requested for an interview, but out of nowhere, in the blink of an eye, he was the odds-on favorite at all sorts of sports books. It was very curious and weird how that happened. And then after that, it was reported that he was going to formally interview, or even informally interview, with the team. And again, I think that context is necessary just to understand how we got here. Now, Brian Schottenheimer has a very unique past. He lost the Let Russ Cook PR battle, speaking of. And it's difficult to even find time where he called plays. The most notable from a successful standpoint is his time with the New York Jets, obviously in the early 2010s when they went to those 2 AFC championship games. And so it's hard to even kind of, you know, when Mike McCarthy took over the play calling, we were able to go back to his days in Green Bay and say, this is what it's probably going to look like. You don't really have that data when it comes to Schottenheimer. But your instincts are absolutely correct. He has very much learned from Pete Carroll during his time with Seattle, and does have that youthful energy, that, you know, just kind of intensity. And I think that he really had done an amazing job from the opening press conference up until the Micah stuff blowing up at training camp, of at the very least putting down the foundation for a culture. There were a lot of people who were starting to get sold. He's quite charming and charismatic when behind a microphone, and you can really kind of fall in love with the football cliche of who he is. And obviously he's an NFL legacy, and even if you hate the Cowboys, it's a cool story. But that being said, this Micah thing has just become this cloud that hangs over anything and everything the team does, and you feel for the guy. And their first preseason game didn't set anything on fire, and so that's now working against him. I would say that we're at a point now where he's starting to get a little bit challenged, where it's a matter of, well, why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? As it relates to the first preseason game, the Cowboys were the only team whose first round pick, who was healthy, I should say, didn't play. Tyler Booker didn't play in the first preseason game. And so, you know how that conversation goes. Patrick Mahomes plays, Joe Burrow plays. Why aren't you playing? Whatever. And fine, you want to keep Dak Prescott in a bubble? Okay, we can totally walk that walk with you. But why isn't Tyler Booker playing? And so those questions are starting to percolate, and we'll see how he handles them.
Yeah, and I think if you asked him privately, obviously off the record, I think he would not prefer the Cowboys. And we know, listen, with it being America's team, they're going to get a lot of nationally televised games, but he would probably prefer the first game not be opening Thursday night against the defending champs in Philadelphia. Like it's not ideal. But again, generally speaking, I do agree with you. I think he's handled things about as well as he could, in the sense that he hasn't made the Micah situation worse than it is in that sense. So, we'll see what happens with that. Someone I'm really fascinated about as a Steelers fan is George Pickens. So the Steelers moved George Pickens to the Cowboys. Dallas gave up some draft compensation. I've been for years saying on the show, man, could you get Dak a number 2 with CeeDee Lamb? It feels like every elite quarterback has a legit 2. And for as emotionally erratic as George Pickens can be, the kid is insanely talented. What do you think that could result in for him? Obviously, he's in a contract year. He's a free agent after this season. So do you think that opens it up more for CeeDee Lamb, maybe to have at least a comparable year to what he had in 2023 when he was healthy? And for Dak, do you think you see a little bit of a renaissance now that he has a legit 2 next to CD?
For the record, I was against the trade when it first happened. And not because I don't believe in George Pickens' ability, but because he was obviously somewhat annoying in Pittsburgh. And it wasn't even a matter of being perturbed by that. It was a matter of not trusting the Cowboys to be able to handle that, right? Like, somebody like the Eagles trades for that. And you give them the benefit of the doubt, right? The Cowboys simply don't have that. And, I think you mentioned he's in a contract year. It's also worth mentioning he's represented by David Mulugeta, who is the same agent who represents Micah Parsons, the powerful one the Cowboys are in this struggle with, whose name Jerry Jones claims to, or at least claimed at one point this offseason, to not know. And so my whole perspective on that was, okay, fine. I was against this. I'm here now. Let's talk about it. Extend him right away. What are you doing waiting? Like the plan is for this to work. The plan is for him to play so well that he will deserve a contract extension in the spring. So why not just get it done now? I equated it, and a lot of people have, to when Philadelphia did trade for AJ Brown. The moment they gave that first round pick to Tennessee, they gave him a deal. Why? Because again, your plan is for everything to go according to that specific plan. And so I will say that the Cowboys, as it relates to Pickens and his annoyances or whatever, they've done an amazing job about that. And I think CD has done an amazing job. They have I think that's where CD has really kind of stepped up as a leader. And that was something the Cowboys wanted to see from him. That was the extension conversation last year. And obviously Dak Prescott is an amazing leader. I'm totally with you that Dak having a legitimate, a bona fide superstar opposite of CD is a great thing. This is probably the most potent, 1-2 pass catching combination he's ever had in his career. CD did play with Amari Cooper, but that was early in CD's career and a little bit before he had fully become CD Lamb. So you have to kind of go back maybe even to the final days of Des Bryant and Jason Witten in terms of this potent of a receiving duo from an overall pass catching standpoint. And so, yeah, it's really exciting. And Dak Prescott, as I'm sure you would agree, throws one of the better deep balls in the NFL. That's where George Pickens can really shine and really thrive. It's quite easy to kind of fall in love and let yourself get excited. It does, again, behoove you to get a contract extension done. But who am I to suggest such crazy and illogical things? To answer the, what would it look like for CD thing, I do think this is a matter of Pickens has to get production too. And there's only so much to go around. And so part of what made CD's 2023 so special from a numerical standpoint was that he was the only guy. I mean, it was CeeDee Lamb and just some dudes. And so I think that Pickens eats into that. I think it is an AJ Brown, Devontae Smith sort of relationship where maybe CD has a down year or not necessarily a career best year, but it's because of George Pickens' presence, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I think for, so much of the folks that have theorized whether or not George Pickens could work in Dallas stems back to the fact that Dak is, like you said, regardless of your opinion on Dak, is miles better than anybody he's had in Pittsburgh. And as you said, throws the deep ball. And I think it's a great opportunity for Pickens because Pittsburgh's offense last year, second half, was so much one-dimensional. It was moon ball or bust. And because Dak can throw, quote unquote, the moon ball, but he's also great in the intermediate routes, the slants, like all those different things. Pickens can really kind of show what he's worth as an overall route runner, which he did at times at Georgia. So I like that. Last question I would ask you is, it's so weird on Dallas. It feels like the kind of line of demarcation is the devastating loss to Green Bay at home, and everything's kind of come apart since then. What do you think? How do you think the Cowboys? I feel like the fan expectations have plummeted. Like, hey, we'll take 10 wins, 11 wins, make the playoffs. How do you think the Cowboys view this year? New head coach, the Micah stuff. We'll see if that gets done or not. But you do have a legit number 2 with Dak, as we've seen. Dak's healthy now. What do you think the Cowboys expect this year to be in terms of their end result?
Well, first of all, I'm really impressed. You have a really strong grip on the Cowboys because that is an important pivot point. Like if it were a book, I mean, that would be like the end of a chapter, and it would be like stage 4, whatever after that. And the context behind it is important. The Cowboys entered that wild card game as the 2 seed in the NFC. At the time, no 2 seed had ever lost to a 7 seed. Granted, there weren't a lot of opportunities for that to happen. They were undefeated at home. Seeded had that year. Dak finished second in MVP voting. And I should say that most fans, I don't mean to speak for a fan base, but had accepted, you know what? We're going to lose the NFC Championship game this year. But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to get that monkey off our back. So what? San Francisco will blast our doors off. It's okay. We'll get to the end. That was legitimately the perspective going into it. And it wasn't just that they lost. It was how they lost and that they lost so quickly. It was over, a quarter into the thing. And so to have to sit on that for an entire game effectively, it really did fracture people. And then that it was followed by keeping Mike McCarthy in a lame duck year, bringing Mike Zimmer back after having not been in football. Granted, he did well in 2024. Jerry Jones claiming to be all in, and then a particularly infamous offseason of inactivity that was headlined by bringing Zeke Elliott back. And then you get to the season, you've got the sun blaring through the stadium, you've got Jerry fighting with the radio host, you've got the literal stadium falling apart on Monday Night Football. Dak getting hurt, it just was as toxic as it could possibly be. And so to your point, I think that fans have developed a serious callous, right? No fan will ever check out. No fan will ever stop watching. No, it is a part of your culture if you're a football fan, right? It's just a part of your life this time of year. You do anything and everything leading up to watching your favorite team on Sunday. And if you're the Cowboys, it's a big deal because they're always on every channel ever. And so I think the Cowboys themselves, I think they expect to be in it, but I think they expect more than anything to be on Sunday Night Football all the time or being talked about at halftime of Monday Night Football or whatever. I have for a long time fought against the idea that the ownership isn't doing everything they can in the name of winning. But recent history has made it very difficult, if not impossible, to defend that claim, right? You look at the way they're handling Micah and the way they handle Dak and CD and the way that they just do a lot of different things as it relates to football. And it's very difficult to suggest that they are just scratching and clawing and looking under every rock to try to gain football competitive advantages. And that's been so underscored by sharing a division with the Eagles. You're talking about a team that just never sleeps, that is completely and totally relentless with regards to obtaining any and every advantage that they can. And so I think that people, who follow, you do have your homers and you got the We Dem Boys people no matter what, because whatever. But I think for the most part, people have accepted that, I really feel for Dak. I really feel for CD. I really feel for Schottenheimer because it's so difficult to win a Super Bowl, to get close to winning a Super Bowl if your team is trying. But when your front office, your ownership is handicapping things and just stirring the pot and making it more difficult for you, it's no wonder why they haven't done it in almost 3 decades now.
No question. I think, listen, Philadelphia's been well run for the majority of the Dak Prescott era, but now the fact that Washington has new ownership, we see what Jane Daniels, that adds a whole different level of pressure and scrutiny on Jerry Jones in particular. And I tend to agree with you. I think most have kind of accepted okay, Dak's not all the problem here. The coach, we've had different guys in here, different, defensive coordinators. There's one constant and it has been for the last 30 years. RJ Ochoa, where can people find your content, man? Because you do a great job.
blogontheboys.com and anywhere and everywhere you absorb any kind of social media, RJ Ochoa is the place. I did not mention it, but I have to as I leave. Brian Schottenheimer also is a Florida Gator, just so we're all on the record.
You just had to bookend it with some Florida Gator.
He's a national champion. He was on the '96 team. Backed up Danny Werfel.
Oh, there you go. That's just the only you're one chomp away from getting banned for life from carving out. Just tell you right now, that cannot happen. RJ Ochoa, Blogging the Boys. Thanks for stopping by, my man. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.